Okay. Thank you, Laurie, for agreeing to have a chat with me about what it means to be a partial load and the struggles in being a partial load. Um, I just want to start with any kind of um, general remarks or general comments you might have about your life as a partial load at Seneca.
Oh, that's a big question. Let's see. Where do I start? I do enjoy it. I enjoy teaching. It's a passion I have. I think if you ask my students, they would say the same thing, that it's obvious that I like my job. There's a I think there's a large burden that comes with being partial load, because I feel like, at least in my department, you have to do a really good job, because if people complain about you, even though I just said this to you, that we're part of a union and I feel very supported, I feel like there are ways to get rid of people. So yes, I'm on a seniority list. Yes, I have some, and I mentioned I think that's a good benefit that's come from when I started at Seneca in 2000. That definitely partial load people have more rights, and I honestly know that comes from our union. But I still think there are ways to get rid of people. So, for example, in my department, even if you're partial load and you have a lot of seniority or more seniority than others, and you've pissed off somebody, that honestly the way to get rid of you is to give you courses that you either don't want to teach or really bad hours, because they have to give you the work if you've signed up because of our collective agreement, but they don't have to make it comfortable for you. They can make it really awful. And so I think that you have to do a really good job. So first of all, students are paying for it, and that's why you should be doing a really good job, first and foremost, of course. But if let's say, for example, with our large international population, I have students who are working, they tell me right out that they're working all night, and they come to school with no sleep, and they either are sitting in the class, on their phone, or falling asleep in the back, or they'll come to get attendance taken and then they just leave because they just need to go home and get some sleep. And I can sympathize with that. I understand that. But if you do something, let's say a student comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I missed this test. I was really sick." And I say, "Okay, but you missed an assessment, so you actually need a doctor's note. And otherwise, your grade is going to be a 0 according to our policy." And I hate saying it. I understand exactly what they're going through. But if they get upset about that, a group of students could go and complain about you to the chair. So the chair, even though I'm partial load, has the opportunity to try and get rid of me if she just gets too many complaints, right? I think our chair is fairly aware of what's happening. And one thing that she's good at is she would call me in and saying, like, "I've had these 10 students complaining, what's happening?" And she would get my side of the story. So I think that part is fair. But if she didn't like my response, it would be easy to try and get rid of me, right? She would just have to make my life there at Seneca uncomfortable, give me hours I can't teach, or days I can't teach, or courses I can't teach. And then I would likely, it's happened to other people I work with, just go away.
I see.
So although I think we have better seniority now than when I started. The union's done a lot for partial load people. I still think that there's some way to go. Like, there has to be some, and of course, I'm partial load right now at Seneca, but I'm also partial load at Centennial, just to be able to make enough money to operate on a part-time basis.
I see. I see it. And what are some of those things that you think are a little bit better now
or anything, for example, like before it was a popularity contest, frankly, in 2011. If my chair didn't know you or didn't like you, then she just wouldn't give you work, right? And if she gave you, if she threw you a course here and there, well, you should feel really, really good about it, and you should stop complaining and stop asking. Now we fill out a form every semester. Yes, I want my 12 hours partial load. And depending on where I am on the seniority list, and I think I'm not high on the list, but I'm also not low. I'm kind of upper mid, that I can feel safe with our department, frankly, getting an influx of international students with the cutbacks, because our sector, the early childhood education field, is in crisis. We don't have enough workers. And so the government has given us more students than we would normally get, which means hiring more part-timers and partial load.
I understand. And how about your relationship with your colleagues, especially full-time colleagues?
Pretty good. I think I have a pretty good relationship with my colleagues. So they all know that I am a steward in the union. they all know that I am the only partial load steward in the union. So a lot of them who have partial load concerns come to me.
Uh-huh.
So I think I get along with most of the people in my department. I'm also my role as a support. I do coordination for second year ECE students. So I meet with them about their, like if they failed a course and now they need to retake it. When they're struggling, when they're having issues, they come to me sometimes as a listening ear. And they'll say, I don't know what to do about my courses, and I can offer them some feedback. And lots of times they come to me in a counseling position, and I have to say, look, I can sympathize. I know how hard this is for you, but I'm not a trained counselor. I can't help you with that. Are you in touch with counseling? And then I can point them in that way. And most of the time they are. It's just they need someone to listen to them because they're super stressed out. And so because of that role, my colleagues will often come to me and talk to me about a particular student, or
Uh-huh.
they'll ask me about, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Are you going to get lots of calls if I do this? Are your students going to come crying to you if I do this, right? And I'll say no, but just consider this. So I don't know. I think our department as a whole respects each other. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I think we respect each other. And I feel like I have good relations with, I would say, most of the people, all of the people. I mean, there are people I don't really know because they're, like I said, only here once or twice a week. And I'm not on campus those days. But when we have our full faculty meeting, if I run into somebody I don't know at the coffee bar, I'll say hello. We have a conversation. So for the most part, I think our department is good.
Good. And how about with the students? Have you ever seen any kind of different treatment from the students full
No,
time?
again, I think for the most part, our faculty really cares about our students. I think it doesn't matter if you're part-time or partial load or full-time. I think they all know the hardships of international students. We all hear it in our classrooms. Um, but there's also the difficulty is that we have to uphold the field, right? So as much as I can sympathize with an international student, at the same time, I have to think, okay, this student is going to go out into the field and take care of young children. Are they capable? If I try to help them pass this course somehow, I don't know, pull strings, I don't know, like what they expect me to do. If I'm trying to do what they expect me to do, please talk to this person, please make them understand my situation. Yes, I feel bad for their situation, but if I talk to my colleague who feels bad and then gives them another chance, when let's say the policy says they don't deserve another chance, is this person who's going to go out and work with young children qualified to do that? Right. So
No.
yeah, I think that's our challenge is that and I think that here's an example of something that was completely, I think, unfair. York Region, I forget who specifically in York Region, but the child cares, the PAC members put together a bursary when our field was really struggling to get enrollment from domestic students. So in my class, for example, this is just to give you an idea, my class of 40 people, on the first or second day, I'll say, okay, how many of you, we're playing a get to know game, how many of you are here from another country? And all but 9 people put up their hand. So let's say 30, 31 students are international students. So 31 students out of my class of 40 are international students. And York Region put together a bursary for domestic students to try to get more domestic students into our program so they could graduate, so they could have more good people out in the field. But it's only for domestic students. So that meant that a domestic student could sign up for ECE at Seneca College, take the program, and not pay a penny because it was all paid for the whole 4 semesters. Then look at our international students who are struggling, who don't get that option, and who are paying 3 times the amount for the course. So the domestic students got a bursary of $2,000 or $2,300. So it was for their courses, for their books, and the international students are paying almost 10,000 or over 10,000.
That's right.
So
No.
there's a huge disparity there. It's not fair, right? There are bursaries that international students can apply on through Seneca, but they're nowhere like what the domestic students got with this bursary. So we understand that domestic students come to us with a hardship, but and we understand how unfair sometimes it is as a department. Most of the people that I have lunch with, that I talk to, but we also have to think about it's right, it's true, it's not fair, but are these people ready to go out and work with young people, with young children? Are they qualified? Right? And I even have another coworker that I've heard her talking to a student saying, okay, I know you missed your classes. I know you missed your test because you were tired. Everybody can appreciate that. But what if this was your job? What if you had to go to your job and you were tired? What would you do? Right? So it's kind of, as much as we sympathize with where they're coming from and how they feel, we also have to think about the field and the reason that they're going to be graduating and going out to work is with young people. Are they qualified to do that? Right? Did they get the information that they need to know to work with young people?
I understand. So it looks like the resources given to international students in the situation
Not
where
fair.
they are, it's not fair.
No.
And
So as a coordinator, I've had international students in my office who are living in a particular area or in a particular house with many other students, paying a lot of money, like paying over $600 to live in a one room or a one bedroom with two other people, three other people. And one of them was worried that she was being recorded because she found a camera in her bathroom. And she got very freaked out and worried, and she wanted my help to move. And so together we went to the residence because it was like she needed immediate help. We went to the residence, and I was hoping that they could give her like 2 or 3 days so that she could come there and stay, and that she could perhaps look for those 2 or 3 days to find something more suitable, right? And when we went over to the residence, they told me, no, we're booked. We have a waiting list. And I said, okay, I understand you have a waiting list, but this is an emergency. Is there not something that can be done to support the student? And they told me, go to International Student Services and they could help her. And I said, okay, great, thank you. So we went over to International, and the international people said, what is this about? Like, what is it? Oh, it sounds like you need counseling and accessibility. You have to go across the hall. So we went across the hall. At this point, the student had gone to class. I went across the hall with another coworker who brought the student to me. And we were told that basically they would be happy to give her a list of shelters that she could go to, but that's all they could do. And I was just like, what? This is the biggest support you can do for a student who's paying 3 times as much as another student? So I think one of the things that Seneca has to do a better job of is, we're building a new health center for students. It would be good if there was actually places that Seneca, we just talked about this in our department with the newsletter that came from, or the interview with President Agnew about the Seneca campus in Markham. So there's all the space in Markham. Why can't they, use this as a place for students to go if there was an emergency? Why can't they move people over there? We can build a parking garage, but we can't build another residence for international students with some sort of a price pointed to it that recognizes what they're paying, right? I have lots of students who live in Brampton because obviously the salesperson who brought them here, the representative told them, oh, it's a very Indian community, you'll love it there. But they don't tell them that it's a 2.5 hour bus ride and 3 different interchanges and how much money that actually costs. So what if Seneca could build something on campus for international students? What if the residence we have, what if half of it had to be set aside for international students at a separate price? I think that's more equitable. But again, that's a Seneca that really cares about international students, right? Because maybe we can't make our programs cheaper, but there has to be things that we can do to support students. I don't know. I think that's just rambling, but I think that's one thing that we could do better as a college, as a polytechnic.
I understand. And what do you think is stopping the college from doing that?
Well, obviously the when I went over to the residence, it's full, so people are paying the full money now. So why would they want to say, hey, this isn't fair, we're going to give half of it to international students, they're going to pay less? It's still a business.
To throw a little financial motivations driving the bus.
Yeah, for sure. Financial's driving the bus.
I see. And in terms of risks as a partial load professor of in relation to his students, the complaining, sometimes in my experience, and you know, base your students complaining because you're partial load, or if they know you're partial load, or even if they don't know, um, students complaining about a partial load, that kind of experiences that resonate.
I think it does. Like, but I would say in my department, it's not specific to partial load. I think it happens even with full time. In fact, I would say in my department, it probably happens more with full timers. That there are a specific couple of professors who literally follow Seneca policies to the T. There's no exception. It doesn't matter what your situation is. In fact, they will even stop students from explaining their situation because they just follow the policy to the T. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but I think for students who are experiencing hardship, that they feel like that person doesn't care about them, because if most other people would listen and this person saying, sorry, I can appreciate it, all the students have issues, but here's the policy, here's what your grade's going to be because of this policy, that students will complain about those people repeatedly more because they feel like they're not supported like they are with the other professors. So I don't think it's that I don't think our students in ECE complain about partial load more. I think they just complain when they feel like they've been hard done by. And I think they don't really care who it is. They just complain. And I think they have a right to.
I understand. And how about in relation to your family life and friends?
So I tell my friends my job, we talk about it, and they're like, oh, you're so lucky you don't have to work full time. Oh, you're so lucky. And I'm like, yeah, I'm so lucky. But listen, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks when our college is done, I'm going to be on a break where I'm not getting any pay for about 3 or 4 weeks. And they say, oh, but you don't have to work. And I'm like, you're right. I get 3 weeks holidays between every semester. It's really nice, but I don't get paid. Right. And the thing that this is my biggest complaint as a partial load employee is that I'm not doing anything different than my full-time counterparts. So when the semester ends, sure, we all take our Christmas break, we have time with our families, but then I start prepping my courses for next semester, but I'm not being paid for that. I'm setting up my Blackboard so students have all the information they need before the semester starts. Like they have to get their textbook before one of my classes. They have to read it before the first day. It wouldn't make any sense or be fair at all for me to say on the 3rd of January, okay, get this book and read it by tomorrow, right? So I'm taking time over my holidays, prepping my courses so that I'm not scrambling in the first week. I'm changing things that on feedback from the students that they either didn't like or maybe didn't teach them what I wanted them to learn, right? I'm doing all of this work over the holidays and I'm not getting paid for it. But my full-time counterparts are getting paid for it. And we're both doing the same thing. So for me, I think that's my biggest complaint about being partial load.
I see. How about qualifications for getting a permanent position? I've heard of that.
So yeah, in our department, we have up to the qualification. So now you need at least a master's to be able to teach full-time. And we just had a hiring of 2 full-time employees. One of them was a very good friend of mine, so I'm glad she got the position. And one was another colleague I worked with for a number of years. I know her. I wouldn't call her a friend. Like I wouldn't spend Saturday nights with her at her place, but I like her. We get along. And so we did hire 2 very good people. But again, you have to have a master's. And I don't have my master's. I have a BA from York University. I've thought about getting my master's, but to be honest, there's no guarantee if I get my master's that they're not going to want now a PhD, or if I get my master's that they won't hire somebody else, right? That I'm not going to be given the position just because I have master's. So for me, where I am in my age and stuff and what I'm looking at for like retirement, if I was younger, if I was in my 40s, probably I would look at doing my master's because I think I'd have a number of more years. I also have a terminally ill mother, so I like being able to take my Thursdays and go take her to her chemo treatment. And if I was full-time, I know I wouldn't be able to do that. So for me, that's my biggest hesitation in getting a master's right now, because I want to spend whatever time I have left with my mom, and I'm not going to put work ahead of that. So that's my choice that I'm making. But I still think that partial load faculty are not paid the same, and it's not fair.
No, I understand.
We're the same work, right? We're doing the same work.
Yeah.
So our
And
contract starts when the semester starts, but we are doing a lot more work before the semester starts. Everybody, if you're a dedicated educator, if you're a dedicated professional, you're not starting your work on the 3rd if your class starts on the 4th. You've probably done a lot more to prepare for that. And that's
what
not
what
for partial load.
what about if I were to, if I were to say something like, yeah, but you can do it quickly, so you don't work that
But if we go
much.
back to my other comment, it's not always quickly. If I'm given a new course, I have to do some research. I'm lucky in my department that going back to relationships, that I could say to someone who's taught the course, hey, do you mind giving me your course outline so I can see what weeks to teach what flows good? And then I have to get the book and prepare it and read it and design my courses around it, my class time around it. It's yeah, I have time. I don't say I don't have time. I have time, but I'm not being paid for it to do it where the full timers are. And if I do it quickly, am I doing a really good job? Or am I just doing it to make money? And that's not how I roll.
I said, and the rationale for things operating this way, well, why not paying?
I don't know. This is one thing I don't understand. Like this is my biggest complaint because I think that if you look at it, I think any person, you don't have to work at the college. If we were to say to somebody out in the street, okay, this person does this and this is how they're rewarded. And then this other person does the same thing over here and this is how they're rewarded. I think anybody would see that that's unfair. I don't think you have to be a professor at a college to understand that that's not fair.
Yeah, I agree. And if I were to think, well, this person has a master's, this other person does have a master's, so probably the one with a master is doing a much better job.
And that's not necessarily the case though, right?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can think of many times where I've worked with someone. I actually work with people who have PhDs. And when I say to them, okay, so the students are saying, for example, I just had this conversation this week, and mostly as their coordinator, but also as a fellow colleague educator. So the students are telling me this in field placement. This is their experience. So how can we change our class, because we teach the same course? How can we change our class so that students get more support in class than they're getting in the field? Because some students have a really good placement and some students don't. And the students who don't are the ones who are complaining, well, I don't understand how I'm supposed to do this. My mentor's doing this, that. And I say to her, how can we? She says, well, that's not our fault. That's not our problem. I mean, we didn't give them the placement. And I'm just thinking, wow, this is a person with a PhD who's supposed to value the experience and the outcome. Like if this student doesn't have a good placement, as someone with a PhD, aren't you worried about all that learning that's not happening? Right? So just because you have a PhD or a master's doesn't make you a better educator at all. I agree with that. 100%.
Yeah, and is the department growing and having new hires and
Yeah,
in
we have new
addition,
hires. We have 2 new hires this September. We had in the last year, we had 2 other new hires. And as I mentioned before, we just had to take on, so every semester, and I know this as being a coordinator, every semester we'll have in our first semester of new students, this is international and domestic combined, we will have 6 sections of new semester students. So we have an NAA all the way to an N, A, B, C, D, E, F, usually an F. This semester, we've gone all the way to I because we've been given and told that we're going to be taking on so many extra international students now because the college has been given because of I mentioned the field is in the crisis, that we need more ECEs and we need them desperately, almost like what the government did with PSWs during COVID. We need these ECEs now to open up these childcare centers. So yes, we're going to take on more ECEs. At Seneca College, you're going to get more ECEs international students. And so because of that, we've had to hire more full-timers, right? But I was having this conversation a while ago with another partial load faculty, and she said, how many of us are partial load? And I said, well, I can think of, and I went through, I named all of the employees that we work with that are partial load because I've gone around and spoken to them doing union work. And I told her, like, there's right now, if we keep the same amount of partial load next semester, there's going to be 15 of us. And she said, 15? But there's more than that. And I said, yeah, but those other people are part-timers. There's a lot of part-timers. There's more than 15 part-timers, but that's 1 or 2 courses. With partial load, I'm talking about people are guaranteed 3 or more courses, right? So she says, oh, I thought it was a lot. And I said to her, it is a lot. If there's 15 partial loads, how many full-time positions is that? Got to be at least 7. If partial loads can teach, I teach up to 4, right? Every semester I ask for 4. If full-time is 5 courses, then we could easily have 6 or 7 new positions. And then she said to me, well, why don't we? And I said, well, that's not my decision. And I said, but I'm guessing it has something to do with benefits, with pensions, with all the other things that full-timers get that we don't, that will cost the college, the Polytechnic, money. It's not, in our department, the question is why, because it's not that we're not going to have ECE students tomorrow. We always have more and more and more ECE students. And the only difference that I found over the years is that we're having less and less domestic students and more international students, right? So there's a time where our department was worried about how are we going to bring in more domestic students? Oh, we'll offer them a bursary where they can study.
I see. So you said you're having more international than domestic.
We have more international students in our program than domestic.
And that's the concern. Girl.
That's the concern because the international students have their own struggles, right?
Yeah.
And what if the government tomorrow says, okay, now we're only going to take X amount of international students in any program? What if our crisis in our sector stops and then they don't need all these extra international students? Then what happens to our partial load opportunities? Right? That's the risk.
Let's see. Personally, I would have liked to see some sort of path to hire partial loads based on their own experience with a college and working, already demonstrating that they are capable and successful at doing the job, and they got like a natural path, you know?
Yeah, if there was some sort of you've done a good job, you've taught these courses successfully, well, you can now apply for this, or this will give you a point system or whatever that makes your work valuable. Could be good, right? But you're always just sort of teetering on, will you get work or will you not? Even though we have a union behind us, and even though I have some seniority, there's no guarantees for me, right? The only good thing I think that's happened because of our union is that if I'm not treated fairly as a partial load employee, that I can now go to my union and say, help me. And I have something to grieve.
Yeah. Have you seen that happening?
I've had to grieve not with my partial load position, but I had in another union, I had a support position that was taken away from me and I was told was redundant. And I ended up continuing doing the exact same position for 2 semesters. And our president said to me, you could grieve that because if your job is redundant, why are you still doing it? And I said, well, I thought I just can't complain because I don't know, I was told this, what can I do? She said, you could file a grievance. And so I did. And it took 2.5 years for that to go through. And it was very uncomfortable for me to still be working in the department with my chair, who I had to grieve her decision. She was very fair about it. I think she didn't treat me badly, but I think because she knew there was a grievance, right? I think she was it wasn't the same chair I have now, but she was more careful about how we interacted because of my grievance. And so one thing I found is it was very uncomfortable for me to file a grievance, but I tell all of my colleagues that if they feel they're being treated unfairly, that they should speak to somebody in the union and talk about a possible grievance. Because if it is unfair, if something's being done unfair, they have the right to be protected and they should do whatever they have to do to get that protection. And if it means a grievance, then it means a grievance.
Have you seen it with colleagues, other people having a similar experience?
I've talked to people who have threatened to file a grievance, and I've said to them, you know what? I'm still new to this position. As a steward, I can tell you my experience of what happened to me. Doesn't mean that you're going to be successful and also in your grievance, but it sounds like what you're asking for is more than reasonable. And they've gone and actually spoken to the chair and said, look, I know I've spoken to the union. I know that I have this right. And I don't want to file a grievance, but I feel like it's not fair. And I don't ask them, I don't follow up and say, hey, what happened? What happened? But I see them still working here and I see them happy. So I assume that their meeting with the chair must have went well. Right? Because I think if they'd filed a grievance, I think they would have come back and said, me, I took your advice. I filed a grievance. Let's see what happens. But I don't hear that. So I'm wondering if our chair is just taking employees' perspective a little more seriously than our past chair.
Yeah, so you're seeing a bit of an increase in more dialogue and respect, more dialogue with partial loads and respect for partial loads.
Yeah, I think it's more out of concern. I think our chair is fairly new to the position. Well, not new. She's been doing it for over almost a couple of years now, probably 2 years in November. But I think she also doesn't, as much as she is friends with all of us, she knows us well. You know, we all go to socials together. I think
friends
she also doesn't want conflict.
Friends in quotations, because they can't see the quotations that you're making. That's right.
We're friends, right, in quotations, but friends can only do so much for friends at work, right? Like, you're not going to stick your neck out and potentially lose your job. She has her own demands in her position, but I think she also doesn't want it to become a toxic workplace where, you know, if she's doing something and people feel that they're being treated unfairly, that they're going to grieve it, and then she's going to have 3 and 4 people grieving it. That's not a good look for her either, right? So I think she's concerned about that, but I think honestly, for the most part, she's fair about it. She listens when people explain their concern, and when she can, I think she supports them. This is what I've seen.
Okay.
And I can say this is different from our past chair.
She just hasn't always been like this.
In our department hasn't always been like that. This has been since our new chair took over.
Okay.
And I hope it stays like that, but I also know she gets pressure from above. And when she gets pressure from above and may lose her job, that she's going to have to do things that probably her employees won't like. Right?
Now, how about looking for the future? What will be your hope for the future?
My hope for the future is kind of what I mentioned already. I really hope that at some point, the work that partial load people do during their off time, so between semesters, gets recognized, and that we are paid for that work. So if Seneca honestly feels that they can't hire more full-timers in our department, that the partial load, you know, so for example, before we weren't given a seniority list, now we have a seniority list. Before we weren't given sick days, now we have sick days, right? That the things that we're getting to sort of equate to what full-timers get, I hope they really look at the between semester work that we do. Because I don't know about our department. I don't go into my colleagues' classes, but I do hear from students a lot. I'm not hearing complaints about so-and-so not being prepared or so-and-so not giving them enough communication. I would hope that if in our department, the partial load people start to be able to be paid during semester breaks, even if it's the week before, just something to say, hey, we recognize that you're not sitting at home or running around the shopping mall, that you're getting your work done, and that's valued, and that this is what you deserve. I mean,
yeah,
I would hope that becomes more fair.
Yeah, it would be nice to have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, anyway, Laurie, we're coming to an end.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
It was nice to meet you.
Sharing. Nice to meet you too. A lot of things that you said resonate with my own experience and my own thoughts as well. So thank you for doing that.
Your story can make a difference. Share your experiences to advocate for respect and fair conditions for all partial load faculty. Learn how to share your story. Read more in the caption below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the work we do together. Follow us on social media for updates and to stay connected with OPSEU Local 560.